Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast welcome back to another RepPath Podcast. Today we got a great topic. We're going to talk about now after you get and break in or are starting a new role in medical sales, what do you do now that you're running a territory and you're actually doing territory management? A lot of you have never ran territories before. Some could be coming from an associate role looking to take over their first territory. So what do you do when you get into this new space, or if you're taking over from a previous rep? So we're going to talk about that today because it's very important, and it's going to be a lot of good information, a lot of real applicable tips that I'm going to help you use that you can help you get success in that first year. But again, before we dive into that, as always, guys, anyone that's listening in, please make sure if you have any questions, submit it into the chat. James will collect all that and we'll address it halfway through the show. Also, for any of you individuals that are looking to break into this industry, we have the RepPath Academy. We're doing great each week. More and more students are joining us. So please go on the website, reppath.com. You'll be able to see all the companies we work with, especially getting more information about the Academy and my background. And one of the best things on the site are the testimonials of the reps that have graduated and have seen success right away using the RepPath Academy. So please check that out. If you want to get a copy of this podcast, because as always, we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Please go on YouTube and subscribe to my channel, Unfiltered Medical Sales Coaching. So you'll be able to get all our content. We are also live on every podcast platform. So enough of that, and let's dive right into managing your territory.
You nailed it today, Joe. Great job.
Thank you. No reminders. Appreciate it. So anyway, guys, so territory management, the most important thing that you can do. All right. You're not going to just go in there and just sell all day long and become the best rep. You have to have a plan. You have to have a strategy, because there's two scenarios that you're going to walk into. You're either going to walk into a brand new territory, launching a new drug in a new area, which is less common than the second alternative, but you're basically coming in there. None of the doctors know about your drug. None of them know about you. You know nothing about them. That is much, much more difficult than the typical scenario that most of you will probably get your first role in, which is taking over from another rep. Okay, so there's pros and cons, when you're taking over for another rep. All right, so first and foremost, let's just start with that second scenario, because that's the more likely scenario. You are either there because someone got promoted. Now, getting promoted, that could be a good thing. The rep is still there. Obviously, if they got promoted, they did well in that territory. But now you're not, Susan, who was the rep that was there before. Now you come in and they're like, I walk in there, who the hell is Joe? We love Susan. Who the heck are you? So that becomes challenging. We'll talk about that. And also the flip side could be the rep either got fired, left the job, left the company, wasn't doing well, poor performance, whatever it is. Now you have to take over for that rep. And that could be bad because now you got the bad reputation of a previous rep, but also it can be great because now you have the opportunity to turn that around, So we're going to talk about that too. So just to dive right in, you got to set the expectations of what do you do on day one? All right. Like, what do you do when you get out there? And it actually starts before that. So you're going to essentially, when you're taking over that territory, the first thing you're going to do, you're going to meet with your district manager, regional director, whoever your boss is, and get a lay of the land of the territory. And you're also going to get a lay of the land, hopefully, if that previous rep is still there or you still have contact with that previous rep. They're going to give you a ton of information. Now, guys, you got to, take it with a grain of salt with the information you get, especially from a previous rep. All right. Because I've had this too, where you walk in and they're going to start telling you where the business is. You're going to go over your CRM data and you're going to see, where you're getting a lot of the business from, what doctors and what hospitals. But you're also going to get information from the rep that's going to say, hey, Joe, yeah, definitely go to Dr. Jones. He loves us. He uses us all the time. Dr. Smith loves us all the time. You know what? Don't even waste your time with Dr. Wilson. He's never going to use you. Dr. Wilkinson, she's never going to use you. And it's good to get that as much info as possible, but don't take it as gospel that whatever they say, that's it. Okay. Because believe me, I've been in these situations where, I couldn't get business from a doctor, but someone else could. So you don't always want to just listen to that rep that you're not going to approach those doctors, because you never know. There could just be something, the rep may not have had a colossal mistake, but something that the doctor just didn't like working with that rep. Something about their personalities didn't jive together. So you don't know, and then also it could be timing. They could be telling you, don't waste time with that doctor. And meanwhile, it was just bad timing. They were working with another company. They had contracts set up. There was a rep that they loved at the other company that now left, or now they didn't have problems in the past. Now they're having all kinds of problems. They have back order issues, poor service, turnover. All these things could happen that changes the landscape drastically. Okay. So the best thing to do though, when you're meeting with your manager, this is where now you own that number, guys. You're going to get a quota. All right. And we'll just say, to make it easy for the year, $1 million is your quota for the year. Now it's big boy time. All right. You're no longer an associate, and now it could be your first role breaking in or a new role out there. But now this is your territory. Now you're in charge of this. You have to hit that number. You got to average that 250 plus a quarter. And the best way to do that, the first thing you're doing is taking that number. And I always add at least 25%. That was always my goal, minimum. I didn't take their goal and make that my goal. That was the company's goal. That was their quota. I always added at least that 25 to 30%, because if you fall short, you could still hit the company goal. All right. And you always want to aim higher than what they gave, the goal they gave. All right. Because you don't want to fall short of your number. You don't want to say, it's okay, I only hit 90% this quarter. No, you got to have the mentality, I'm going to hit my number every single quarter. Of course, it's going to happen, guys. We're a quarter here, a quarter there. You don't hit your number. But if you're setting your goal just to hit their goal, you're going to fall short more often. So always aim higher and make that your real goal. So when you start with that higher goal, so now we're at 1.3 million and we have to average 325,000 a quarter. So now we got to work backwards. How am I going to get there? Okay. So now you got to start doing some simple math and seeing the number of procedures, the number of prescriptions, whatever, if it's pharma device, whatever the number of sales you have to make to get to that number. So once you have that number, now you have to break it down even more. Where are you getting this business? And this is where you're sitting with your manager and you're discussing, because they're more than likely there is current business there when you're taking over a territory. It's very rare that you took over a territory and there's zero business. There's going to be some business when you take over a territory. So where is that business? And then you're going to map out your doctors and break them up into brackets, because your top business, where you got your top 10 physicians that are really cranking out your number, that could be almost 70, 80% of your number right there. I've seen it a lot. It could be just 10 physicians that get you to that number. It might even be less. We want to make sure we're in those priority accounts right away. And that's what I set up. I set up a tiering system. Okay. So my top tier are my tier ones. Tier one is the top physicians that I know that have currently used us. They love our company. They love our products. They've always supported us. We got great relationships. We got great access. We want to be in there that first week to let them know that you're here now and you're here to take over. This is where you're doing your probing. This is where you come in, and you don't get in there when you have doctors that are currently using you, especially, but any doctors, you have to learn more about their drivers. What do they want? What problems were they having previously that you're there to fix? Or what was the previous rep doing that they loved that you want to continue to do? But that's all questions. What can I do for you? It's all about them, guys. Has nothing to do with you. You're there to provide support. And you got to be in those accounts first. All right. And then we want to go to where we got some business. There was some potential, but it's not consistent. Those are our tier 2s. Tier 3s are the business that we had, but we lost. All right. And then our tier 4s is no business at all. We never had any luck there, and then you're going to develop what's called a heat map. So this is going to help you develop when you map this out in your territory, and you're going to see where all these accounts are, because they're not all going to be in one location. All right. And this is going to help you map out your weeks, where you're going to spend, a couple of days in such and such counties, and then, say Monday and Tuesday, you're in the northern counties of your territory. Wednesday and Thursday, you're in this, the southern part, the central part on Friday, whatever it is, you're going to start breaking it down where it makes sense. Because the most important thing about territory management, guys, is efficiency. All right. When you start as a TM somewhere, you're going to be pulled in so many directions. You're going to be drinking. They always say this, you're drinking out of a fire hose when you start. And it's true, because you're learning new products, which is always challenging, because it doesn't matter. If you never sold this thing before, it takes time to learn. You could be learning a whole new therapeutic area. So you're learning about new parts of the body, all these things that you need to, start over. You're doing that. Then now you have a number to hit. So you gotta now introduce yourself to new doctors, but not only introduce yourself, now you got to start booking cases or driving business, getting prescriptions, whatever it is, on top of your administrative work, and then you don't even know where the heck some of these offices and hospitals are. You're driving around trying to get to them and navigate the right routing. It's all about efficiency. So that's what you're doing the first couple of months, is really getting a lay of the land, but you want to make sure that you're getting in front of your customers where your business is at risk. Because when you're not in there, don't forget, you don't have a transition typically where the rep is there until the day you get in and it's a smooth transition. A lot of times there's a little gap where the rep may have left a few months ago, and there was, a manager or someone, covering it half-assed here and there, but it's not the same, guys. So every day you're out of that territory, the vultures are coming in from the other companies, and they are trying to get that business because you're doing the same thing to them. Trust me, when no one's there, the old saying, the cat's away, the mice shall play. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. They're going to be in there trying to mess shit up for you and steal that business. So you want to make sure you're getting in there as quickly as possible and developing that routing, developing those efficiencies in your, even you're navigating from area to area. So you're saving a lot of time and being able to conquer a lot of ground quickly. All right. So, okay. So, but we got to think like President's Club winners, right? We come in there. We don't come in there with, I just hope I do well. I just don't want to, you don't want to have a weak attitude that you just don't want to screw up. You hope that you're just doing the right thing on a daily basis. No, we are out there to be the best. All right. So you got to set goals for yourself. And I would always make a commitment, my own personal commitments. You could share with your manager if you want, but it's something that I always would hold myself accountable to. And that's, you create that number that you want, of course, but also if you really want to think like a President's Club winner, then what does that number look like? So looking at those rankings, what are those top guys? Where are they? That's where I want to be. And that's what you start striving for. So how does that work on a daily basis? That doesn't, that you got to get much more granular now than just the number of cases. So how many calls do I need to make? What kind of an impact? If there's trials involved where a doctor has to try it out, how many of those trials do you need to get signed up, each month? How many verbal commitments do you want? Whatever it is, you got to create a different stages, so you can get to that number and hold your, different goals, whether it's number of calls per day that you're going to make. It could be number of in-services. You could start doing things that are controllable. If you're having difficulty getting access in certain areas, it could be, I just want to get X amount of face-to-face contacts today, and I want to do that on a daily basis, and I would force myself to do that. I wouldn't just do calls. I would say, because there's some days in your territory, you might not see a doctor. You might not have a face-to-face conversation. That's real. But I would always have a number. Today, I'm every day this week, I'm going to speak to face-to-face with at least 3 doctors every day. So when you're at the end of the day, when most people are going home at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because a lot of people say they're working at 5, nonsense, doesn't always happen unless they're in a late case. A lot of people are sitting in traffic. They're saying, screw this, I'm getting home. I don't want to be stuck in traffic. If any of you guys ever worked in New York City, you know that hell when you're trying to get out of the tunnels to get back to Jersey. And I've been there before. If you don't get to the Holland or the Lincoln before 3:30, 4 o'clock, you're never getting home. And a lot of reps would rush to get out of there. But if you didn't hit that goal each day, you don't leave. And that's the difference of a President's Club winner, a high performer, and an average rep. They don't care if they have to sit in traffic and not get home till 7 o'clock because they're stuck. They make sure that they hit their goals. If you force yourself to do that, guys, it sucks. Trust me. I've been there. I hate sitting in that traffic. You're cursing in the car. You're miserable. You're hungry. You're tired. You just want to go home. You want to go to the gym, but now you can't. But these are the sacrifices you have to make if you really want to be a top performer. So whatever those goals are, set those non-negotiables with yourself and make sure you're doing that on a daily basis. And some of the things like that, like not just making a call, but getting a face-to-face, it'll force you to make those extra calls at the end of the day. It could be in their first month that you got to see the first week, you got to see all your top customers. Again, first non-negotiable. The second week, those tier 2s, whatever that is, but you got to make sure that you're getting in front of these people, because the quicker you do all this, the quicker you're going to see results and get these doctors to give you a commitment for the business. Okay. Next thing that's very important is your CRM. Guys, there's a lot of reps that do the CRM and they use it very well, but there's also a lot of reps that don't. When Salesforce first came out, Salesforce is a great product. It's been out for a long time now. I hated Salesforce. I only cared about Salesforce when I started in pharmaceutical sales, when the monthly numbers came out. And that's all I cared about. I just wanted to see my numbers. I wanted to see which doctors were using me, where the growth was, was I making an impact? And I wasn't good with call notes. I would put in the quick little note, the generic one over and over, just because I was a young rep, didn't care. But as you get older and you realize the value, especially now that you're taking over from someone else, you're going to see a lot of these notes are dumpster fires, that they don't put good call notes in. And then you're going out there and you're a little blind. So you want to make sure that you're cleaning that up, not only with putting in good notes after every calls, but also cleaning up what's in there, and this is where the previous rep, the hiring manager, whoever that is, you want to make sure that that data that's in there is real, because some CRM system will have different stages of where the business was, especially for longer cycles. They could say, out of a 5-stage system, there's 3 accounts in stage 4. Meanwhile, you get to these accounts, they don't even know who the hell you are. They don't even know who the company is, and there obviously should be a stage 1 in like the discovery phase, so you have to clean up your CRM right away. What are the real accounts? Where is the real business? And a lot of that fluff, you want to get it out of there right away. You want to focus where that business is. And you're going to see there's always a cleanup period in CRM. You have to get on top of that right away, guys, because you got to use your CRM. This is your database. This is where all your information is stored. The more that you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. I'm not saying you got to add War and Peace to every call note and do all that. No, we're not here to waste time, but you got to put the information in there. When you walk into an account for the first time and you meet staff, you don't just drive. This is my mistake I would make. I'd make a little note on the back of a card, wouldn't put the call notes into Salesforce, and then as I learned, you're putting everyone's name in with a description. So the next time you go in, you're reviewing your notes, you're going back out there, and you're going to start seeing that the more that you're interacting with the rest of the staff, making that total office call, and they actually, their name the next time you walk in. Trust me, everyone likes to be called by their first name. It helps build relationships quicker. But by doing that and actually adding those notes in CRM, trust me, guys, it's going to help you much quicker. It's going to help you get acclimated to that territory much, much quicker. So make sure you're doing that. Do not be one of those reps that is a nightmare with their CRM. It's also going to get you on the wrong foot with your hiring manager, because no hiring manager, you got to understand, they're being pressured by their management too, by their bosses. And when you have a screwed up CRM, you don't have call notes in, they're asking the manager for reports, for data. There's sometimes your manager doesn't want to call you up. He just wants to go into Salesforce and pull that data. But if you don't have that in there for him, if you don't have notes on certain, on progress of certain goals or whatever the heck it is in there, then it makes their job harder. And you're only going to get on their shit list by doing that. So make sure you're airtight with this. It's going to help you. It's going to make you a better rep. And it's also going to put you in a better position with your manager. Okay. So, sorry, give me a sec. So I would always put these accounts too. Another way to put it is, like we said, the tiering system. You also want to I also will break those tiers into risk. All right. Now, meaning where's the highest risk that we can have losing to losing the business either to another company, or for whatever reason, they're just going to stop using us altogether. So that would be our highest risk, medium, and low. And you want to make sure, and this is part of your heat map, because you could have a contract expiring coming up next month at, say, Mount Sinai, or at Boston Medical Center. Theirs is expiring in a couple of weeks. That's going to be high priority. Okay. That's going to be your red. You want to be in there right away, guys. You want to be in those top risk accounts, because you do not want to walk into a territory that you lose business. If you want to destroy your number right off the bat, that is the quickest way to do it, is ignoring those accounts. So for instance, you could have an account, back to our $1 million goal, that could be worth $200,000. One account could be worth 20% of your business. And you have a contract that's set to expire in a couple of weeks. You drag your feet not getting in there, that expires. You just lost 20% of your business the first month you walked into that job. That is going to crush you to try to hit your goal. So now you're starting off on the wrong foot for the year, and you're already 20% down. This happens, guys. So you have to take that seriously. You have to make it non-negotiable. You are in those accounts, making sure that you're securing business first. That's the most important thing, because you got to do that. And then you could start working on your next layer, where you could start, those are your growth accounts, and really being able to go in there and grow those. And then our lowest tier, those are the ones that you never really had any business and you're trying to get business from. A lot of times reps make the mistake. They get the numbers or they get the data, and they all go after the highest volume, highest potential doctors or highest potential hospitals. Of course, we got to chase after where the big business is, but you don't get short-sighted and just look at those customers. Excuse me. Sorry, one sec. Sorry about that. Anyway, you don't want to get short-sighted and just look at those customers, because they're a challenge. If you're looking at them, trust me, so everyone else is. But some reps get so short-sighted that they just, no, I got to get Dr. Jones. He's doing 20 cases a month when the average doctor is doing 3. I have to get him. I have to get him. That's great. You don't want to overstep 5 other doctors that can give you a couple cases each a month, and you could still get to that number. I've seen this happen, guys, where reps walk into doctors' offices, they see no one sitting in there or 2 patients sitting in there. They get low volume from them, and they just ignore them. Remember, a lot of these doctors that are big monster whales now, they started out somewhere. So they got to that level. They weren't there overnight. And a lot of these reps that really build amazing territories and careers, they work their asses off with these no names, you want to call them doctors, these small potential doctors, because they become monsters for their territory over time. So don't get short-sighted. Take all the information, you also need to factor in when you're developing your different tiers and risk, the access. All right. And just a quick little, teaser. We are collaborating with another company that is going to help with all this, giving you outstanding information. We would describe it as AI, but it's not really AI, but it's basically getting information in your hands when you're walking in there that first time, knowing nothing about the doctor, and then also on the back end, helping you input information into your CRM so you don't have to waste time with a lot of that busy work that we often neglect because we're tired at the end of the day or we're rushing to get to our next call. It's going to help with all that. So it's amazing, amazing technology that's coming out, guys. So stay tuned for that. But getting back to that, you want to make sure that you're not ignoring those, those little guys. Because again, in time that they're going to grow and that's going to help you grow. All right. And the access. So you don't want to say to yourself, I'm going to put as my top priority, Dr. Jones, because he does all these cases every month. But meanwhile, you have no access at that account. Or there's a contract with another company for the next 2 years that they're locked into. You don't know. So, if you know that information, why would you try to force and think, don't think it's great to be optimistic. It's great to be confident in your sales ability. Don't be delusional. There's a big difference. Okay. If you're delusional, it's not going to get you anywhere. You're going to go up against a brick wall and they can ignore you. They could say, Joe, I have a contract with XYZ for the next 2 years. You are not getting in here. Okay. Again, doesn't mean you don't just wait till 2 years till you see them, but they could be telling that could be legit, guys. You got to do your homework and get as much information. You're still going to call on them, but you got to find where the low hanging fruit is right away and where your business is, and not just be, lying to yourself that I'm such a great rep. I'm going to figure out how to break through that contract and then also get through the no access account and get all that business. That's just dumb, guys. So you got to think smart that way. So don't be delusional. Be confident, but not delusional. And again, getting back to some of these, first calls with your customer, this is making them feel comfortable, guys. Because again, like I said, they could be happy with that. As we started the call, they could be happy with that rep that was here before. And they say, well, Joe, you're not Susan, Susan A was better looking than you. B, she knew us inside and out. She always did the right thing with this staff. Her personality was just great. She worked really well with patients. You're there to make them feel comfortable. You're not there to take over and change everything. If it was going smooth, your job is to have it continuously go smooth. All right. And that's when you're asking all those probing questions. If it was a shitstorm before, and that's why you got out of there, that's why that rep is no longer there, then you tell them that, it was poor performance. He did a bad job. That's why they brought me here. I'm here to fix it. So please tell me what your problems were. Tell me where she screwed up. Where did they fall short? I'm here to fix it with the company. We're here committed, to make that happen. That's all. You just want to make them feel comfortable. You're not going to go into some of these accounts and all of a sudden they're just going to be just throwing business at you at every account. Of course, you're going to have your loyal customers that really love the product and the company, but there's going to be a lot of those in between that they're happy using another company right away. So you have to make sure you're making them feel comfortable. That is the key when you start. Next is communication, guys. When you start, you don't want to be that rep. And I've had reps do this, that they started the company. Some of them, were just bad hires, and some are great hires that they feel like they don't want to bother you, as a manager. You want to have a lot of communication with your manager. You don't want to report every little stupid little call that you make and, be annoying, obviously, but you want to have a set plan, and keep in contact with your manager, letting them know the challenges, the opportunities, get them involved, make them earn their paycheck too, guys, but it's good. It's always good, especially in those first few months, that you are letting them know, what you're doing, because it could be slow in those first months. And the worst thing you can do is have no communication, because they don't know. They're not with you every day. So if it's slow with no communication, in the manager's mind, that equals not working. So at the beginning, over communication is fine. Again, not after every call, but giving them your key wins, your key challenges, all those things at the beginning, that's fine. Share that. They're here to help you, to work together, and they're going to help you succeed. So you want to make sure you're doing that. Don't get out there. Don't be one of those rogue reps that says, I'm not going to bother my manager. I can figure it out. Don't do that, guys. It's stupid. They're there to help you, make them earn their paycheck and work with you, especially at the beginning, because until you get up and running and you're really running smooth and you're starting to crank out and get in the groove, then you can, take it easy with that constant communication. But at the beginning, let them know, because they can help you and say, hey, Joe, we actually tried that plan. It didn't really work. What about doing this? Or tell them, hey, we discussed that we're going to have this game plan. I tried it. It's not really working. So what other, plan can we come up with? But just, communication is great. We're all here to help each other out, guys. The more money you make, the better numbers yours are, the better it is going to be for your hiring manager. So they want to help you. Okay. Well, I see where we are with the time. I'm going to pause here for a second. James, if we have any questions from the crowd.
We have a couple, but if you have another point to add, feel free to add it. We can always
I could come back later in the call. It's okay.
All right. Well, we got Paolo. I'm not even going to try. Do you consider that physicians' coverage is directly related to the sales goals and medical device? I'm coming from pharma sales. Prescriptions for other hand strategies, omnical, are OM. Is that a medical term? I don't know what that is. Are valuable in medical devices. You got someone reading medical terms that don't understand medical terms.
That's okay. So just read that first question again. Do you consider
that the physician's coverage is directly related to the sales goals in medical device? I'm coming from pharma sales, specifically prescriptions, for other hand strategies. Omni-channels are valuables in medical device?
I got to be honest. I'm just trying to figure out that first question. Do you consider the physician's coverage is directly related to the sales goals in medical device? I honestly, I don't even understand that question. So I apologize. Can you rephrase that?
Yeah, rephrase it.
Yeah. Sorry, man. I don't understand what you're asking there, because you're talking about coverage. I don't know if you're talking about coverage, for in terms of reimbursement, product coverage, or actually covering that account. So if you can clarify that, Paulo, please, and I'm happy to address it. But I'm sorry, I don't fully understand it.
Joseph, again, not even Angun Banjo. How can I break in a medical device industry even though I've been stomped?
It's a great question, Joseph. As we discussed at the beginning of the call, the RepPath Academy, 100%, that is the best way to break into this industry. And James is posting this now. Go on my website, RepPath.com. That's RepPath.com. You'll be able to learn more about me, my background. But go at the bottom, you'll see the companies we work with, and then also the graduate testimonials.
There you go.
Where there's individuals in there that didn't even graduate from college yet, and we helped secure them positions before they even got out of school. So we're going to provide you with online learning and also live group training to cover everything you need, from optimizing your resume, your LinkedIn profile, interview prep, networking, closing, everything, how to answer STAR questions. We're going to go over all that and more on online modules, quizzes, and homework assignments. And then we're going to combine it with doing live group training every week and work with you until you break in. So that is the key. We don't give up on you. There is no time period. There is no, we're only going to do this for 2-3 months. And then after that, sorry, man, we tried. No, we're going to keep working with you until you break in. So please check out that website. You could shoot me a message on LinkedIn, and then we could book a call, but more than happy to help you do that. We've done it with thousands of reps. We're continuing to do it every week. So, we'll be happy to have you join us at the RepPath Academy. But thank you for that call, Joseph, for that question.
How many live coaching calls with you a week, Joe?
2. We do Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern.
So you have direct access to Joe 2 times a week.
Yes.
Until you get into the
no other coach is going to do that.
Yeah,
they're not going to do the combination of both.
He followed up. You pretty much answered it already. How can I make a career pivot in medical device sales, even though I've been stomped on the way to break into the industry?
Yeah. Same question, but thank you, Joseph.
We got. I'm coming from pharma, where territories are pretty structured. Medical device feels like the Wild West. How different is the approach to managing your territory when you're selling capital equipment versus consumables?
Well, all right, so that's a little different. Capital equipment is different than obviously it could be a medical device that's capital equipment purchase too. But just to break that down, first off, pharma to device, when you're going in there, yes, it can be more Wild West. So typically for some of you that don't know, when you take a pharmaceutical role, your CRM, your sales force will be very buttoned up. You're going to see your physicians. You're going to see, all the doctors in your territory, obviously, and it's going to have it broken down by the number of prescriptions that they use of your products and also the competition. So it gives you a really good picture of like, okay, I know I got to go to Dr. Jones. I know he's using XYZ drugs in my class. So I got to convert him to use my drug. So it can help give you an initial, roadmap on what you should talk about, what marketing materials you should use. It just gives you much, much more information. Not to say it's easier. It's not. The challenge with device, you're not going to get that much information like you do in pharma. So here's one of the challenges that I always had in device. People bullshit. It's just the nature of this business. It's the nature of any sales job, and not in a bad way, but you're going to get doctors. And I've had this happen where, my manager will call me pissed off because, Dr. Jones has only given us 2 cases in the past, 6 months. And meanwhile, he found out, from somebody else in the industry that Dr. Jones does 10 cases a month. So we're hardly getting any of his business. Now, a lot of times doctors say that because it's true. And then also they say that to entice reps to keep coming in. I mean, just think about it. If I know you're going to give me more, love and care, you're going to give me more TLC, of course I'm going to say, yeah, man, I do this, every day, So, but Joe, what I need from you, I need to meet more podiatrists, or I need to meet more internal medicine doctors. So they can look to you for that information because they're looking to meet more referrers. So more internal medicine doctors that you introduce them to, could potentially mean more business for them. They also could be looking to get their staff fed more. So you're in there doing more lunches, more in-services, giving them more time to try to get that business. Meanwhile, some of these doctors might only do 2 cases a month. You're never going to fully know that. It's very hard to get that exact number, guys, because they don't have that data that the medical sales companies can get. All right. But as you get into your territory and you ask more questions, I mean, some of this, guys, when you ask a doctor, how many do you do a month? How many do you do a year? Whatever it is, at some point you got to take their word for it, and also you also got to realize when they're full of shit and time to move on, because I've had doctors that I had to actually have tough conversations. And hey, Dr. Jones, sorry, I've been calling on you for 6 months. I haven't gotten 1 case from you. And you're telling me you're doing 10 a month. All I'm asking for is 10% of that, just to try me out. Like, you got to have those difficult conversations. So that's the part that's a little bit more frustrating with device, but the only way to really know that, guys, is get out there, have conversations, be aggressive, book for cases, ask the doctors when you're in there. The good thing about this, they know, or they can have their schedule pull up their next case, because they don't book the cases that morning. They're scheduled. So their next month will be booked out, at least their next 2 weeks for sure. Their next 3 months could be booked out. You want to make sure that you are asking them for that next case. And then before you know it, once they start to get to know you and really like your service, like your product, like how you work in the OR, you're going to start getting on that schedule more and more. So bottom line, don't be frustrated because you don't have all that information. It feels good. It does help. But don't forget, everyone else is in the same boat. So it's not like they're all getting this information in device and you're not. Everyone is going out there where it's a little bit more wild, wild west. But the longer you're in that territory, you're going to get more of a firm grip on what's reality and what is, the BS that you're being told. So that's pharma and device. The other part that you asked was capital equipment. Capital equipment is a totally different monster. It could be, again, I sold a robotic system that sales cycles went up to 3-4 years that we were waiting, because the process, you're building out a room. They can't do it until the imaging equipment expires in the room where they have to, exchange that out. And now is the time to do that. Or they're having an expansion, or the budgets don't open up for that division until, 2027. So all these variables will come into play where it could totally change the whole process. So that's a different animal. And honestly, that's a call for itself. Right now, let's just focus on the device and pharma.
How often do you reevaluate your account tiers? Like, should I be reshuffling my A, B, and C list every quarter? Is that overkill?
No, that's a great idea. You have to, you should be always reevaluating, what your progress is. I always, at the end of each week, and I get a lot of slack from this online, people say that that's idiotic. I'm working too hard. I don't have any balance. I have no life. I mean, you hear all this nonsense online. Listen, guys, all I know is when you love what you do and you're really into it, spending a half hour on a Saturday morning, while you're having coffee, while you're watching, college game day, whatever you're doing, you don't have to be sitting there in silence in a corner. You could still have your computer out, look at your territory, give it a little attention when you're having a cup of coffee in the morning, and just start mapping out, what your progress is. You should have monthly goals that you set for yourself. Use that time to give a quick assessment of where you're at. And when you do that more often, that helps you stop from falling behind too much. Because when you do those assessments, you nip it in the bud right away and go, wow, shit, I am falling behind. Why is that? Maybe it's my messaging. Maybe it's my routing. I'm going to the wrong doctors. I'm prioritizing the wrong accounts. So you should be doing that as much as possible. Every Saturday, I would do that early in the morning, get a workout in, sit down, having a cup of coffee, again, watching game day. I enjoy it, but I'm so much more prepared on a weekly basis that helped me become successful. I'm not saying you got to change your game plan every week, but it's good to at least give that a little attention. So at the end of the quarter, when you are going to meet with your manager, do you know how much more prepared I was on those quarterly reviews? Because you're going to give a quarterly review, most of these companies, and you're going to sit there and you're going to have to go through where all your business is. You know what a bad rep does? They scramble with their presentations, the night before. They have to do this. And it's obvious, guys, when you get in there, you see it. You see the reps that are on top of their business. They know everything. They know the dollar amounts. They know exactly where their number is. They know exactly where they need to be. They know where they're losing business. They don't hide anything. There's not a lot of secrets. They don't have a lot of excuses either. Bad reps that aren't on top of their game, they make up a lot of hypotheticals. Especially, again, I did, post on this. This is excuse season for reps. The summer, usually August timeline, that's vacation time for a lot of doctors and offices. So reps always use that. It's going to be slower. I don't know what's going on. More doctors have gone on vacation. Now it's the holidays. Oh, the offices are closing down. It's Christmas. It's Hanukkah. All, doctors aren't in. Guys, you don't want to, while some of that is true, you don't want to make that your excuse for not hitting your number. Excuse me. Or falling behind. Because trust me, they don't care. Your manager doesn't care. His manager doesn't care. You're there. You're paid to do a job. So if you give it more attention, you're going to be more prepared during those quarterly reviews each summer. So that's my suggestion. Every week, you don't even have to do it on a Saturday morning, maybe at the end of the day on a Friday, spend time, whatever that is. If it's easier for you to wake up early on a Monday morning, fine. For me, I didn't like having to feel pressured. I like going to sleep at night, with a clear head on a Sunday night. So that's my advice.
It also helps when the Bears are in first place.
Yes, absolutely. We'll see in a couple of weeks when everything falls apart, but for now, we're happy.
Hey, it looks like you're looking good. What would you do if you inherited a territory where the previous rep made promises the company can't actually keep? How do you rebuild that trust?
Well, again, with honesty, you got to be realistic. Don't come in there giving all false hope, guys. And that's a great question too, because you always want to impress people when you meet them. That's like a natural instinct for all of us. You want to impress people. You always want to make a good first impression, but sometimes it's not in the cards. You don't have a lot of doctors. This is a real situation, you guys, we put in. They're going to say, "Hey, Joe, excuse me, if your company has any, is looking for any speakers, I would love to speak for the company." A lot of times doctors say that, and meanwhile, they've prescribed your product like 3 times in 2 years, or they've used you on 2 cases in 2 years. They have no right to even ask to be a speaker, but you as the young, eager rep, especially taking over account, you want to say yes as much as possible. That's you just have that. It's an instinct. Like, I got to tell him yes to every request. I got to say yes, and you don't want to do that, guys. Some of the stuff you could say, "Hey, I can't answer that right now. I got to find out, but I'll get right back to you." That's okay. But more, you want to set expectations, and if a previous rep did that, you want to come in there and be like, "Hey, I know that's where we fell short in the past, where certain promises were made and not kept. I'm not going to do that. I'm here to be very realistic with you, and very transparent, and if I can do something 100%, I'm willing to do it. But if I can't, I'm going to tell you I can't, but I'm going to let you know right away. But I'm always going to try to find a solution that works for both of us and that we can actually accomplish, because the last thing I want to do, is set high expectations and fall short, because that's not going to help, our relationship. It's not going to help your practice. And that's it. So just transparency, honesty, that's the best approach. Sorry.
You got, how do I figure out which accounts in your territory are actually worth your time versus the ones that are just seem promising on paper?
Sorry, say it again.
Hold on, I'm scrolling to the next one already. How do you figure out which accounts in your territory are actually worth your time versus the ones that just seem promising on paper?
Well, again, this is where those, when you have no information, you got to just get in there. Hopefully the previous rep or the hiring, your manager can give you more insight. But if it's actually, again, what looks good on paper, is kind of there's more information needed there. Again, if the numbers are showing, that's a great sign. But if it's just positive call notes too, without any kind of results, because reps do that. They'll put that in there. The doctor promised to use me. The doctor has confirmed that he's going to use us next month. He has 3 patients lined up. I've seen these call notes. A lot of times reps, they put in a lot of bullshit when they're, they know that they're underperforming because they want to string out their job as long as possible, or, keep it optimistic and hopefully things start turning around for them. I've seen that. But at the end of the day, guys, the only proof you're really going to get, you can't run a territory just with your CRM. You got to get out in the field. You got to get in front of your customers. If a call note says on paper, the doctor has 5 patients lined up for us, I am in there the next day saying to that doctor, "Hey, spoke to Susan or whoever had the territory last, just want to follow up, make sure that I have the correct dates for those cases that you have booked, or just want to follow up, and review these patients that you want to prescribe your drug to, your medication to, and then start getting more information. If the doctor is looking at you like, what the hell are you talking about? Obviously, it's nonsense. But you're never going to know until you get out in the field and really start having those conversations.
Joe, when you find a competitor is about to get into one of your key accounts, how aggressive do you get? What's the line between protecting your business and looking desperate?
But again, guys, I always approached it like someone is doing that every day anyway. So, I mean, they really are. You don't want to have a, fight or flight mode where you're only going to get really aggressive, and really protective when you heard there's a new product out there, or, you found out that a company just put a new rep in your territory. Like, no, guys, you got to think that way every day. You got to approach all your accounts like that every day. You're always at risk. You are not the only one that's allowed in that account. Believe it or not, that doctor that you think loves you and treats you like a son, same name basis, gives you a cell phone, texts all the time. You joke about the Yankees, or whatever your sports team is, you go to the gym. I mean, I've had these relationships where going out to dinner, going to the gym, going out, for drinks, going to bars, going to games, just having fun. We, just because we're friends, don't think you're the only one that you have that relationship with that doctor. There could be 3 or 4 different guys, same relationship, could be more, who knows? So you always got to approach it, like someone is in there right after you walk in every day trying to get your business. That's going to keep you on your toes. And by doing that, it means that that doesn't mean, oh, someone's coming in here, so I have to be in here every day guarding the office. Like, it doesn't happen like that, guys. You got to just continuously bring value, continuously make that physician and that staff know that you are not replaceable. Even though we all are, again, we all move on from companies. Companies, you're usually going to find someone else for that job, but you got to act like that, because believe me, the doctors, they want to work with the reps that really are continuously bringing value. And you got to do that. If you do that, you'll be able to protect your business from anyone from the outside.
How do you mentally handle a quarter where you did everything right, but the numbers just didn't come through because of factors outside of your control?
Yeah. I mean, if that's real, I mean, first you got to take a real assessment. Is that real, or are you lying to yourself? Are you really doing everything right? Is there really nothing more you can do? Are you really coming in with the right messaging? I mean, typically when you're not hitting your number, of course, there's always things that are outside our control, but if you really are honest with yourself and even your manager is like, hey, Joe, I don't get it. You're doing everything right. I'm with you. I agree with the messaging. I agree with the game plan. Sometimes doctors get slow. Sometimes they don't, they don't have that patient coming in that uses your device every week, and it could happen, but I think having that honest assessment with yourself, and really, again, this is why you always got to control and own your territory, really own it, and there's a big difference between just managing a territory and having full ownership of it. When you actually have that ownership and what's going on, then you'll be able to say, hey, you know what? I did fall short because Dr. Jones, who usually does 5 cases a month with us, he was away all month. And this is real. And you could have a couple of doctors that happens. And if you could show the numbers, like I lost 12 cases last quarter because of X, Y, and Z. That's where we fell short $300,000. But this quarter, we're going to more than double that because that's not going to happen. And those cases are going to be booked. I already have them booked ahead of time. No company is going to give you shit for that. But when you start reaching, I don't know. I mean, it was crazy. Last week it rained all week, or, it was whatever holiday. But when you start reaching for that nonsense, guys, that you're not being honest with yourself. Your manager's going to see through it. Just be honest with yourself, but have that ownership where if it's okay to fall short, you just got to know why you fell short. Excuse me.
How do you adapt your strategy mid-quarter when you realize what you planned isn't working?
I mean, you could make a, football term, James, hot route. Do that at the drop of a hat, guys. I mean, you could be in an office sitting outside waiting for the doctor to come in and just realize, shit, what I've been doing isn't working. I'm going to try something new. Do it. That's fine. It's okay to fail trying a different avenue. But if something's continuously not working and you're not going to pivot, or you're going to say, I'm going to wait till, another month, and waste time. Like, no, you got to have urgency, guys. You also don't want to overreact. Okay. Just because you had a slow couple of weeks, now that's it. I got to revamp everything. No, this isn't an easy answer. This is something where the experience in that territory you're going to get that vibe. Is this working? Is it really taking a while, or is it completely not working at all? Am I totally off, with my game plan? You'll be able to know that, but you want to make changes quickly. You don't have to, you're usually in your territory with yourself and maybe a couple clinicals. So it doesn't have to be this big company-wide, revamp that has to go on that takes months to happen. You could make internal changes quickly in your territory and just change your approach. So again, be honest with yourself. Once if you feel something's not working and you want to change something out, then do it. You could do that instantly.
How do you handle when your own company launches a new product that cannibalizes something you've been selling successfully?
Your company uses a product,
launches
a product that's taking away,
that cannibalizes something you've been selling successfully.
Well, I mean, typically companies are gonna reward you, and make your bonus dollars or your commission dollars more incentivized by that new product. They're not going to ever say, we want you to focus on this product, even though if you sell, X amount of this, you're going to make less money than currently selling this. They're never going to do that. Sometimes there's a pivot, where you're really doing well and have a lot of adoption with an old product. And now the new product's coming in. For instance, we've had products in the pharma side that they were going generic. So now it feels good that you got such a high market share with this, this old product, but if it's going to go generic, that's going to drop quickly. So you have to refocus, and there could be a dip, to start focusing on the future, on the new product that's going to bring money in. So sometimes it's a challenge, but that's just part of our business. But most companies, they're going to do the right thing, and they're going to incentivize that new product where you're going to want to sell that more, and that's why you're hired, guys, because a lot of times you're not just there to sell one product the rest of your career. New products come out, especially in pharma. A lot of companies, they call them, your priorities in your bag. You'll hear, what's your P1, your P2, your P3. So when I was at Organon, our P1, when I sold birth control when I first started the first year, and was NuvaRing. My P2 was Cyclessa. And then my P3 was an antidepressant called Remeron. So, of course, I had a lot of Cyclessa business. Who cares? I wasn't getting paid on that. Because now they're going to change the bonus dollars and push it all towards NuvaRing. So while, say, I had 500 scripts of Cyclessa a month in my territory and only had 10 of NuvaRing, believe me, that company is going to make it way, way more incentivized to sell each NuvaRing script than it is selling 50 of the Cyclessa scripts. So you start to change your motivation because they're going to change it for you by putting the bonus dollars behind it.
Joe, how do you literally map out your territory? Are you using software, a whiteboard, or just keeping it in your head? What's actually practical?
I'm doing number one, I'm doing it. I'm putting everything into my CRM. That should be whatever CRM you're using, especially this day and age. They're really, really advanced. So you should probably have majority of your stuff in there, and also Excel spreadsheets. Because there's a lot of times there's things that I would create my own little spreadsheet that worked for me. For instance, when I was at Boston Scientific, I would have mapped out the cases that I had scheduled for the quarter. I also would have, where my trials were, where my permanent procedures. I would put in, my targets that I'm going to try to gain business from. I would have all this in onto a spreadsheet too. So CRM number one, and then whatever Excel spreadsheets, those are always my go-to number two.
Have you ever negotiated with your manager to restructure your territory boundaries? How did you make that case without sounding like you were just trying to cherry pick good accounts?
You have to have good justification. That's number one. Now, first off, let me back up. That's going to be much harder to do in pharma than in device. So in my experiences, pharma, that was almost never going to happen. Could you fight for a doctor that everyone knew? That doctor, you and him had a great relationship. You built that physician from the ground up. I mean, sometimes reps, the doctors call the company and say, if you put someone else in here, I'm not going to use you. That could be good or bad. It could kind of work against you, because you always want to be a company, supporter. You don't want to be that person that's just looking out for yourself. For me, I would always try to have that doctor, transition nicely into that new rep, because what comes around goes around. You might be losing a big physician due to a realignment, but you never know what you could be getting in the future. So always want to be a good team player, and not always try to, on the pharma side, it's tougher because the territory realignments, they get mapped out ahead of time, and then they do a realignment and it pisses you off because you built these relationships. Now all of a sudden you're in a whole new territory, or they took away some of your key doctors and split the territory up. It's hard to make that justification. In device, more often than not, your manager, if you have good justification, is going to listen to you. But you got to come in there. If you're going to have any ask, you have to do your homework and justify why should that doctor stay with you? Why should that account stay with you? Don't wing it and go into that meeting just because, I have a good relationship and the doctor loves me. No. It's got to be mapped out. Everything. It's got to be results-based. It's got to be evidence-driven, and go into that meeting with that info, and then you have a better shot at getting your manager to agree with you.
Joe, we got time for one last question from LinkedIn. We got Steven Plopper. How do you recommend a rep recover and rebuild trust with supply chain after a tough value analysis meeting? Product preference is favorable to our product from a surgeon standpoint, but price is favorable to the competitor.
Well, that'll come down to your champion. I mean, that when you're talking about value analysis, you're talking about VAC committee, you need a strong champion. So getting a strong champion, I know a lot of times, guys, we develop champions and, to be quite honest, they're not a big decision maker in the hospital. Just because they're a physician doesn't mean that doctor walks in there. Don't forget, some of these guys have privileges. They could be at that account, that hospital, and do 2 cases a month. Do you think they're going to be able to walk into that VAC committee and start dictating what products they want, available? So always look at the champion first and see, what kind of influence that person has. Because you may want to pivot, especially if it was a bad VAC committee, VAC meeting. You're not going to get so many of those where you're going to get doctors that are going to go in month after month, keep fighting for your product. I mean, eventually they're going to say, guys, no, we're done talking about this. So make sure you have a strong champion, not only with supporting your product, but also has a lot of say at that institution.
And that's all we have today, Joe.
Awesome. Well, thank you, James. And thank you all, guys. Great questions today. Again, if there's anything that we couldn't get to, always welcome. DM me on LinkedIn. Anything I could do to help. If you want to set up a call, please go on my LinkedIn page and you could schedule a call with me, especially if you're looking to get into the RepPath Academy to break into the industry. And for any of you individuals that are lobby members, as always, guys, please use the promo code Licata when you reach out to me, and that'll entitle you to further discounts. But we will be doing these calls, and I appreciate you guys every Monday and Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if I don't speak to you guys, Have a great weekend, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next Monday at 3. Thank you.